Welcome to the Tow Club Industry Podcast. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Art. Today, we have a very special guest who I have been discussing the possibility of having on the program for quite some time. And the products and services they offer are going to be very familiar to much of our audience. I have Mr. Ryan Davis from Autura on here. Ryan, thank you so much for joining, man.
Of course. Thank you guys for having me. Super exciting to get on and tell you guys a little bit about what we're doing and how we think about the industry in general. But super grateful for the opportunity here.
Yeah, of course, man. So, hey, just pretty standard here, but I want everybody to have some more information about, what they're listening to, what they're watching. Can you tell us a little bit about, obviously, who you are, your history in automotive, and your experiences in the automobile industry since got started in your career?
Yeah, of course, Art. Uh I've been around the car business really since a little kid. I grew up in Atlanta. My dad was in the car business. He owned franchise car dealerships all over the Southeast. So ever since I was a little kid, I was spending time at car dealerships, around cars, working on cars, cleaning cars, driving cars. So I've been around in my entire life. Um, Early on in my career, I tried my best to stay away from the car business and worked in finance for a little bit. I was an investment banker, worked in a hedge fund. Um, and then, something about this business just kind of pulls you into it. It's fun. There's lots of cool entrepreneurs, guys who are trying to do new things, whether it's car dealers, towers, whoever. It's just an incredibly entrepreneurial space that generally speaking, I think is like ripe for innovation. It's incredibly fragmented, easy to move online. So in that spirit, in 2015, I was part of the founding team. My brother, myself, and another third co-founder, Josh Parton, we started a company called Backlot Cars. Backlot Cars was an online marketplace for the dealer-to-dealer space. Basically, it was an online dealer space replicating somewhat the process that Manheim or ADESA, the larger car auctions, did in order for dealers to liquidate their wholesale inventory. Um, the way we grew that business was we looked at that business model of Manheim and ADESA, which they had 150 locations between the two of them across the country.
Wow.
That were all hyper regional marketplaces. So out of your guys' backyard, the Manheim or ADESA in the Bay Area, they'd have the same sellers, the same new car dealers would go to the same Manheim every week, and the buyers, the used car dealers, would go probably to one or two auctions during the week. So they were highly fragmented markets, meaning that the same buyers, the same sellers would show up bidding every single week. So the way we approached the market was we looked at it and thought, well, why are folks in California not buying cars from people in Texas or other way around? Why aren't people in Texas buying cars from California? So to simplify it, we spent a lot of time building the product, going really, really deep in the middle of the country in Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Nebraska, Oklahoma. And we built a really solid base and showed that folks were transacting cross state lines. And then we expanded that business from those five to 46 states in about 18 months. We grew that business. When we sold it, it was doing roughly 55 million in revenue at a run rate level.
Wow.
Sold that business to Car Auction Services, which is now today known as Open Lane. And that was the kind of the end of my journey in wholesale, or for the time being at least. And so after I sold that business, I took a couple of years off, kind of like regroup, rethink where I wanted to go next. And at the end of 2022, this opportunity within the towing space presented itself to me. I found it to pattern match really well with the previous endeavor, Backlot Cars. For the most part, the way I think most towers look at selling these abandoned or unclaimed vehicles is maybe they're selling it to one or two local dismantlers. Maybe they're running their own local auction, which has like limited reach amongst the demand base, the buyer base. or maybe they're using an online platform that is replicating very much that like local or hyper regional model. Um, so I joined the company, took it over at the beginning of 2023. And since then, we've been trying to run so much of the same playbook we did at Backlot Cars, where we're trying to expose new demand to the in-place supply that the towers have. And the only way that's accomplished is by aggregating large pockets of supply like we did in the Bay Area, and bringing in demand from the outside, bringing in outside transportation to move the cars from California or Texas or Chicago or Kansas City to nearby geos. But we're pretty early innings. But I do believe that's the way the market is going to go. I think we have a model in Copart and IAA who sell a similar mix of vehicles to what the impounded or the unclaimed impounds look like. And a large portion of the vehicles that sell on Copart and IA not only move out of the state that they originate in, but they're even moving out of country. Um, so yeah, we're solely focused on impounds and towers, unclaimed vehicles right now. But yeah, that's kind of the whole thought around it.
Sure. No, I think that's a heck of a story, and it's pretty awesome how you were able to, with your initial venture, get it built up to that point in that very short period of time, in my opinion. However, I think it kind of demonstrates to touch a little bit on what you said about ripe for disruption and innovation and technology. It kind of demonstrates how badly the automotive space in general needs that, because that sort of tells the story as far as how you were able to do it so quickly, in my estimation, which is not a lot of people thought to do that. And I do want to be really upfront with the audience here. As a small tower myself, I have had very good success with Autura Marketplace, which is one of the reasons why I was so interested in having you come and discuss. And my follow-up question to this is, could you tell the audience? I mean, obviously, I know this, and I know how you do it, and I know how much better it's made my vehicle disposition experience, getting rid of these cars that are on my lot. But could you tell the audience a little bit about how Atura Marketplace helps towers get better prices for their vehicles? In other words, how you're bringing new buyers, creating bids, exposure, et cetera, because it has definitely helped us. And it seems like in the towing space, it's very seat of the pants, it's very fragmented. Towers aren't necessarily doing this in a very or in the most efficient manner. But I'd love to hear from you, and I think towers would also like to hear how you are able to do this. What are you doing behind the scenes to affect this for towers?
Yeah, of course. Well, I think like from a high level, it's like somewhat simple, right? Like it's the importance of focusing on certain geos. While Art is a customer of ours inside that region, we have another 15, 16 folks who are doing business with us.
Right.
Uh, so because we have that sort of scale on the supply within the Bay Area, where Art is, we're able to like pour more resources into driving demand. Whereas, if you're doing this on your own as a tower, you may be like limited in your reach on like the demand side or how much time you can spend developing your demand side. But
Totally.
I'm representing, 15, 16 different towers and pounds in that region. We can like leverage all of the supply, go to the buyers and be like, hey, we have a lot of supply that we've aggregated here.
Right.
And we do that mostly by, digital marketing. So all states are different. In California, some of the towers who are watching us, public is allowed to be involved in buying the cars that are the unclaimed or the abandoned vehicles. So we spend a lot of money on like digital marketing, trying to drive like kind of what I call like the long tail of the demand, the public people, the retail people. Maybe it's someone looking to buy a car for themselves that they need a cheap car and can't get financing or can't get something from a dealership, or they just don't trust a dealership. So we spend a lot of money on digital marketing in that channel. And then as you kind of move up into what I call like the fatter center of the bell curve, like area of the demand, we have, a buyer outreach team, which is literally a group of folks who are like, calling 50, 100 people a day, trying to get them, showing them the inventory we have, walking them through the process of buying. And because of that, we're able to like aggregate demand onto the marketplace. That it's just like kind of an economies of scale sort of situation. Um, Now, not to take away from like some of like the local auctions or the local tow lot auctions, there are folks, Art and I met a couple weeks ago, and he was telling me about his friend in San Diego who may be selling 1,000 cars a month. Like when you have that sort of volume to yourself, you are able to drive it. But the fact of the matter is, most of the folks who we are going after are probably like subscale. I don't even want to say subscale players because there's not many folks who have 1,000 cars a month, but like your average, I would say, tow lot guys who have 15 to 100 abandons a month. That this is not necessarily a core business, especially when you're a PPI tower and you want cars to get picked up and claimed because that's the way you're going to make the most amount of money.
100%. We don't necessarily want to be in the car business, and I can't speak for the whole towing industry, but in my experience as a metropolitan tower in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a finite amount of space. We're in the business of towing the car, releasing the car to the owner, and go on about your day. We would prefer not to have to deal with the disposition of unclaimed vehicles. But however, you just pointed out something that I think is very important, which is most towers are dealing with a small number of vehicles, a nominal, like you said, 15 to 100 vehicles on a monthly basis. So with that being said, we can collectively benefit from a shared resource, which is you, as somebody who has made the capital investment to get buyers pointed at our listings. Um, my follow up to what you said, Ryan, is like, I, I don't like to speak poorly of an industry that puts food on my table, right? But one of the frustrating things for me is when I have these sort of towers in the same market are generally not going to disclose to one another their sort of secret sauce, right? Because they're concerned about competition. However, disposing of vehicles is not a threat to one another, to towers in the same market. We all need to sell our cars. And so, I am happy to share my positive experiences with your marketplace. Like, hey, we're getting better money per car. We are getting, because of the dollars that you spend harnessing buying power and getting new buyers, we are getting more retail buyers, which I think is very important for towers to kind of like, hey, towers, listen to what I'm saying here is you're going to get your regular flippers, right? We towers refer to these people as people who are generally buying cars and then they want to resell them or whatever. But what we are not getting is the people who want to buy a car. We are not regularly getting that type of retail customer. So because of your investment in getting those buyers to us, we are able to get buyers that we ordinarily wouldn't get as a result of your efforts. But Mike, I'll get to my rather long-winded question here. I kind of know this, but what are your experiences thus far in terms of the pushback? Like what is the negative pushback you are getting from towers who think they know, how to do it, and they don't necessarily want to maybe adopt doing this in an online fashion? What are towers that aren't using your platform telling you in terms of why they aren't?
Yeah. Um, well, I think a few things. One, when I got started early on, I was trying to wrap my head around who's the right tower for this. And it took me 6 months. And then I kind of came on and it's like, all right, the right tower for this is kind of what I mentioned, the guy who has 20 to 100 cars a month, where this is a not of a core piece of their business. So once we get to that, like we can like own in on like, all right, this is the right fit. If you're saying you have 1,000 cars a month, I would love to have the business, but we're not going to be able to add the value that we can to the guy with 20 to 100 a month. So, I think the folks who have 20 to 100 a month, the biggest piece of pushback we hear from them is, oh, you know, I, it's more work for me. And while I do understand it's different work, I would make arguments about it being harder work. I think like you gotta like prove to them that, like, listen, this fits within your process nice. It's easy to use. We're going to provide a really, really high service level. And, ideally, we're going to make you more money along the way, build up like a following around your cars because you represent your cars accurately, so on and so forth. But I would say like the biggest piece of pushback is it's more work for my folks. And we're trying to figure out ways to do that, like whether it's like building integrations within the different TMSs, like Tow Club,
Mhm.
or Tops or Tow Book, building integrations into that, I think removes like one layer of friction within the work. Um, and that's who I would say are folks who are running like small subscale auctions. I think to the folks who are literally selling to like one or two local dismantlers, they look at it and say, this is definitely harder. I fax or email the dismantler a list of the vehicles that I have available for sale. They come over, bring me a check or ACH me money and get rid of the cars. And to those folks, it's a little bit different of an equation. I say to them is it's like, hey, we've got 15,000 registered buyers, or we have 15,000 active buyers on the platform. A lot more registered than we haven't activated into buyers. And if I can put 5 people now looking at your inventory, do you think you're going to actually get a lower price than you have 2 people? And
Right.
so those are the folks we really, really like to target is, hey, I get 30 cars a month and LKQ or Pick and Pull or Pick Apart or some local dismantler buys them all. And, generally when they're within a market that we're already like existing in, you can go to them and add value right away just because money talks, right? If you're
Yep.
getting 200, 300 a car and the tower down the street that's doing business for me is getting $1,000 a car, I just, brought you another 200,000 to your bottom line at the end of the year, maybe for a little bit more work. But I think at the end of the day, like money talks, and that's worth it. So I would say those are the two biggest things: is one, different work, and two, more work.
Got it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, that is, that makes a lot of sense because that is consistent with what I hear. And I don't want to trash my own industry or be disparaging. It's hard for me to remain patient when I talk to other towers who otherwise would ask my advice on something, particularly when they're out of your market. So if I have a really good friend, he's in Kansas City, and I can talk to him about anything. He doesn't have any concerns about the information he's giving me. I don't have any concerns about the information that I'm giving him, and so on. And but some of the, and he's got a sizable operation, so he is like-minded in the respect in terms of, yeah, I want to be more efficient. I want my efforts to pay off better. So if I'm going to use this technology, I want it to reduce my operating expenses and or increase the efficiency of my operation. But it is frustrating sometimes when towers say, "Oh, I just sell them to my friend," or "I put them on Craigslist," and I'm like, "Man, like you could do so much better." I think sometimes people, and the reason for my question was is, and I thought you explained it very well, but sometimes people don't understand how harnessing the power of pointing people online at certain things, like they don't often understand how that sort of leads to better buyers. Could you explain just a little bit about how you're getting people? So if a tower is not using an online platform now, could you explain to the towers who don't how you generate new buyers for them,
yeah,
just in the
yeah,
AdWords sense, let's say? Yeah, could you?
yeah. I mean, listen. Think about digital marketplaces, Airbnb, Uber,
Mhm.
and like the early adoption curve for it, right? You know, there's like the early adoption curve for Airbnb. Early on, I think Airbnb sounds cool. I can start making money if you're a host on Airbnb. It's like I can start making money with that extra room I have in my house, right? And like they were solving a real pain point for that person who maybe couldn't afford their mortgage or just wanted someone to like take over a room in their house from time to time. And on the demand side of that marketplace, you had folks who were traveling a lot, maybe wanted like a more homey experience in a hotel. And that was what they were like heavily focused on. and like compiling that demand and that supply like within that and like ideal customer profile. Person with extra room on the supply side, person who wants a more homey experience on the demand side. And they found what we call like the chasm crossers in like digital adoption on the marketplaces. And then it's like a flywheel. The person with the extra room stays how good their experience is. Then it goes to like up market, the person with who maybe has a second house that they're not using
Right.
all the time. And then you
Right.
get people who are using it for vacation rentals. And then the next step on top of that is institutionalizing the supply. Now Airbnb is like 90% folks who own 5 or 6 Airbnb properties. And
Right.
it's anyone who wants to rent a house, a room. There's even hotel rooms on there, okay?
Right.
And the same thing with Uber. Uber figured out early on, if you remember Uber early on, it was not for me going to work every day. It was black cars. They were
Yes.
solving like a certain pain point of
Right.
people who were traveling a lot, going to the airport a lot, having to use a black car a lot, that were not liking taxis anymore. And then
Yeah.
they had all these like people who they could like create entrepreneurs out of, or black car fleet owners that they could like do it. And the same thing happened with Airbnb. They opened up at the top of the market and like moved down market. And so the same thing goes with towers. Like there's network effects involved here. And the network effect is the more sellers you have in the region, the more supply you have in the region, meaning the more amount of cars you have in the region, meaning the more amount of buyers that I can bring to it. Because you do have to consider, like, if there's only 10 cars in a region, I have one tower who only has 10 cars a month. I'm not going to be able to get a lot of buyers because that's going to be really, really competitive and the buyers aren't going to have a lot of success. Meanwhile, if you get 10, 15 towers, start selling 500, 600 cars in that market a month, you can drive a ton of buyers, both on the retail side and the institutional side, meaning those dismantlers. And that's like the big unlock. So it's important, like the folks that we're kind of talking about here that are frustrating are, those are what I would call like late adopters of this. But you know, there are folks out there like you who I call chasm crossers, who see that there's a better way, in a more efficient way, and that this is not core to their business for the most part.
Yeah.
And if you can just provide the easy button for them, which I think we're getting better and better at,
Yeah.
like they'll come along. So the importance is like, one, getting the most amount of supply we can in a certain area and never giving up. It's not like a, all right, we're at 1,000 cars a month, like we're good here. It's like
Yeah.
continually adding more supply and continually adding more buyers to support that supply. And the way we do that is again by like just like running marketing campaigns, going door to door to the dismantlers, constantly calling them, trying to like show them the supply that we're going, and really building like a really, really good experience, more aimed towards the professional buyer, the folks like LKQ who need to buy 100, 200 cars a month.
Right.
But still providing support for the retail buyer who are going to be like the folks driving the prices up higher and really keeping those professional buyers honest.
Ryan, you know, something just came to mind. What if there is a percentage of this, or if there's any, do you have what I might consider institutional buyers in certain markets? You know, whether or not you want to disclose who they are, is that a target for you to bring more of these sort of institutional buyers for whichever types of cars, whether they are running and driving cars or cars that don't run and drive, like let's say institutional salvage buyers, or are they using the platform now? Is that a target? Is that a goal of yours? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah. So with regards to the institutional buyers, we have lots of them. And most of the cars on the marketplace are bought by these institutional buyers.
Okay, great.
And we're highly focused on them. The economic model around an institutional buyer is that why they cost more money to like acquire.
Sure.
Whereas like, you know, you may be able to acquire a retail buyer with a single Facebook ad that, you know,
Sure.
it costs 50 cents or something.
Yeah.
An institutional buyer may take time and effort, and they may be hesitant of trying
A
to
handshake, an agreement.
yeah, handshake, whatever. But these are folks who are coming and like, if you can provide a really good, compelling experience for them, on top of like making them very successful, like you may have a customer for life, or a guy or gal who's buying 100 cars a month from you. And so at the core of what we like really focus on we split the application of the marketplace into the demand side and the sell side. The sell side is highly focused on providing delightful experience for the towers. On the
Yeah.
demand side, it's highly focused on providing a delightful experience for these institutional buyers, because these are folks who come around over and over and over again.
Yes. Okay, sounds good. Yeah, no, that, and I think that's really important for towers to understand that, you are directing time, effort, and resources into providing, let's say, sunlight to those vehicles, to those institutional buyers who are going to be repeat customers. And so the experience has to be good and fair for them. And of course, you also have to give, allocate, I should say, efforts to making sure the towers are getting close to market rate, if not above market rate, for the vehicles, so that both sides are sort of happy. So you put a great deal of emphasis on both sides of the equation, so that this is a sustainable model moving forward, which kind of leads me to my next question. Where do you think online auctions is going to go? Let's say, and what I have in mind here is 5-10 years. And I'm asking this because on one hand, I want to see how much adoption, not just necessarily for your marketplace, but just marketing vehicles online in general for towers. But also, what comes to mind is we have these EV vehicle adoption mandates in certain states, and perhaps there's going to be federal adoption of that at some point. What that means in terms of like, hey, these internal combustion engine vehicles, there's probably going to be incentives to get them off the road en masse in the future. So where do you see the future of online auctions going in general?
Yeah, great question. I think you have to like think about it in terms of like stages of adoption. Too long, don't read. Example is like everything's going to be sold online at some point, right?
Right.
You just have to think about the dynamics and like the demographics around like the folks in 5 to 10 years who are going to be the future owners of the tow lots, whether it's going to be, people who are acquisitive, and buying tow lots and impound space and so on and so forth, who are going to want like a highly streamlined organization, and they're going to be like the ones who are open ears to a scaled marketplace. Or you have like the generational like pass down of the event. And in the case of like the generational pass down, we have another client there in San Jose that his dad started, or his grandpa started the tow lot, went to the dad, now it's him. The guy who's running it now is 27 years old. He very much grew up in the online environment, and this feels natural to him. And that's just the brass tacks of the matter. Is sure, like you may have like the 55-year-old guy who's succession planning and he has a highly successful in-person auction. But I tell you what, his 28-year-old son, when he comes in to maybe take over the operation, is going to be a little bit more open-minded about doing things online, because he's spent his entire life on social media, and,
Right.
and Amazon's been available and this and that. And so like you really have to be thinking about not only building for what you are, like the chasm crosser, but like the next generation tower that is going to want, a highly sophisticated towing management system like Tow Club and an online marketplace and answers for all this, because these are folks who want things like streamlined. They're spending all their time behind the computer, and
Right.
kind of belong to the work smarter, not harder, but often
Yes.
are working harder generation. And so I think at some point, if you're not doing this online, you're going to be missing out.
You're hurting yourself,
You're
perhaps.
going to be hurting yourself 100%.
Yeah, that it's so interesting. So I mean, it sounds to me like, first of all, the succession story of towers. I oftentimes, when I have casual conversations with other towers, and from a software perspective, I'm talking to towers, and I don't want to, I don't want to say this is the exception or this is the rule, but generally speaking, when I talk to other towers about, let's say, our product or any other software for that matter, towing management software, I often say, okay, the dad who's 70, he's not interested. He's just not. He's like, yeah, whatever. I'm not interested. But when I see the sons take over, that can go two ways. Either the son is like, well, daddy told me he's been doing it like this for 50 years, so that's the way I'm going to do it. And I have to be completely honest here, and towers don't like hearing this. That guy is not going to be successful.
No.
Now, on the other hand, sometimes the boy takes over and he calls me or calls another software company, but he calls me just to shoot the breeze or whatever and just, hey, you know, I'm taking this over from my dad. I think there's a better way to do things. Like you mentioned, this is a guy that grew up in an online environment. He grew up with an iPhone or an Android, and he's used to apps. That kid is going places, and he's in all likelihood, and I've seen this in my local market, that kid is going to do better than dad. He just is. Like I've witnessed this with my own eyes. So I'm encouraged by that. And I think you're right. Organically speaking, it's just going to be nearly all online at some point. And then that sort of leads me to this next thing I wanted to ask you, which is
And that's an important thing to remember, Art. When I started my company, Backlot Cars, my dad said nobody's ever gonna buy cars at an auction online. Okay. And
that
my
must have been gratifying for you to prove him wrong, right? I mean, it's
well, I think there's he's couldn't be more proud of my brother and I, but he said no one's ever gonna do this. Don't do this. This is never going to work.
right.
And we said, all right, well, we bet it is. And my mom was a very big sweetheart and gave us a little bit of money to start off with, like a very little bit. And she got paid when we sold the business, and my dad didn't. He couldn't have given a lot more money. And there is some gratification there. But I completely agree with what you're saying. It's like it's like adapt or die. And if you're not continually changing and like looking for like new ways, and even internally, you know, the way we are, like, I think like something like that's going to be hitting this industry, and maybe it's not like outward facing, but like where's like AI gonna like take us, right? Like if you're not
100%.
using AI, and like I think most towers won't have the ability to build on different AI models, large language models themselves. So like that's like something I'm thinking about constantly is like, hey, there is competition within the space, and I'm sure you guys at Tow Club are thinking about it. It's like, where the heck can we like applying AI in our model to like serve them some bit of AI to like help streamline some
100%.
of the processes they have.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, I 100% agree. And I think that, you know, what I'm about to ask you, I think is going to sort of be the deciding factor on how quickly this sort of online adoption takes shape over the next 5-10 years. But what I wanted to ask you is does your marketplace have an interest, or are they actively sort of from an API perspective? And I'm not going to pretend that I know every aspect of everybody's API, but are you guys willing and able and in process, let's say, of talking to other towing software companies in terms of, hey, how can a tower who has this vehicle in their vehicle database, how can we make it easy for that tower to push that vehicle out to your platform? Could you shed a little bit of light on that?
Yeah, so I think like a few things. We want to do that because it's another friction point in the process. It's like, okay, so now you sold on here, you're gonna often need to like input this information back into your towing management system. And that's like a friction point for our customers, the sellers on the platform, the towers. So that's something we actively done. We built some integration already with Towbook. It needs a little bit more work, but like we are agnostic to who we're working with, just because we understand like the power that the towing management systems have within the towing management systems. At the end of the day, are business critical applications for the folks who are using them. They are the system of record and how you run your business. And so having the communication back and forth via APIs is incredibly important, and something that we like look to develop more over time.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. And I know, and I'm chuckling here because I know my team is listening to this and they're like, okay, yeah, good. That's good. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, because obviously being agnostic means that, you know, that the rest of the towing industry could benefit from these relationships, because regardless of somebody's using Towbook, Tow Club, and there's a host of other really good softwares out there, Traxero, et cetera, regardless of who people are using, and for those towers that are listening here, this means that, you know, when you have a vehicle that's in your Towbook software, you can, in theory, push a button and that's a listing on the marketplace. maybe with a few tweaks, as opposed to saying, oh, let me log in to the marketplace and then let me type out this VIN or copy and paste these things in. So this could make the efficiency of the labor required to post vehicles, just it could just make it that much simpler. I appreciate your explanation there on that, Ryan. I mean, I don't want to assume that towers don't understand some of the terms that I've learned, not necessarily organically. I've learned from the development team that we work with, but I look forward to that. And I know my team is listening, and they're probably emailing you as we speak. But hey, Ryan, I've taken a ton of your time. I'm very grateful that you've taken the time to be on the program. And was there anything else that you wanted to share with us in relation to the marketplace?
No, I mean, listen, I think like a few things to the listeners, like we'd love to hear from everyone. My philosophy around building businesses is simply this. It's like, if I'm not creating value for all of my customers, then I'm going to get forgotten and left in the dust. And what I'm aiming to build is like an incredibly valuable application for both buyers of these vehicles and sellers of these types of vehicles. And we're committed to constantly reinvesting in the product, making it better, staying ahead of any potential competition. And we want this to become a really, really, really big business. And we know that's only achievable by accomplishing what I just mentioned, making an incredibly valuable, delightful experience for our customers. So like, I think some people may be listening and wondering, are we in your market? If we're not in your market, we will be soon. I'm very disciplined and focused on the markets that we're currently in. Not to say that we're not growing, we are. But back to what I mentioned earlier, like at the end of the day, I built a similar company, and I know what served me well last time around was going incredibly deep in the markets I'm in to drive the prices higher and creating a valuable experience for buyers and sellers. And so like, we ask your patience. I think you're going to see more of us at some of the towing conventions, the tow shows. We should have some people there in Baltimore. I know we'll be in Orlando and Vegas in the spring. But like, stop by, say hi. I love interacting with all the towers. I was just in Kansas City yesterday. Had a great lunch with another, what I would call Casting Crosser tower. Highly sophisticated relative to a lot of the folks I meet on how they approach the market. And there's a lot of you guys out there, and it's like Art said, the folks who are doing this are the ones who are sharing information through like maybe a 20 group or something to that effect, where I understand in a single market, it at some point is a zero-sum game, whether you're getting on the municipal contract or you're going after the same property managers for the PPI contracts, so on and so forth. But there is experience sharing across borders where you aren't competition with the other people.
Yeah.
And everyone should be sharing the tools that are working for them across these and why they're working. And if you are working with a vendor that's not listening to you and not actively trying to make their product better, you should find a new vendor. And that's the way we approach the space, is like, listen, you're hearing it from the top. I run this business. I'm highly focused on accomplishing those goals. And the only way I'm going to do that is not sitting from my ivory tower deciding what you guys need next as a feature release in the product, but coming out and like visiting with you and listening to you. But that's all I had, Art. I thank you guys for your time.
Yeah, no, man. Again, I appreciate it. And I do want to remind all the listeners that all of the contact information for the Autura Marketplace will be in the video description. And Ryan, thanks so much. And one more thing to towers, if you aren't willing to know, don't tow.